So we're about a month out from the midterm elections now. Georgia has had time to do its U.S. Senate runoff. California has had the multiple weeks it apparently always takes them now to get their votes counted. But we've got through to the end of the midterm elections now. So now we can finally bottom line it. And the bottom line is, in this year's midterm elections, Republicans did terribly. They had a historically terrible showing. I mean that in a technical sense. Historically speaking, in the first election after a new president has moved into the White House, that president's party gets shellacked in the midterm elections. And, don't ask me why. It's what American voters like to do. They like a candidate and a party enough to put them in the White House, and then immediately, next chance they get 2 years later, they change their preference to the other party for controlling Congress. I don't know why it always goes this way, but it always goes this way. If you look historically, since World War II, the party that is not the president's party has picked up an average of 26 seats in the House in the midterm elections. The average since World War II is 26 seats. And recently, it's been even worse. In the last one of these, in President Trump's midterm, Democrats picked up 40 seats. In President Obama's first midterm, the Republicans picked up 63 seats. And that historical data is presumably why Republicans, ahead of these midterms, they were crowing about the fact that they were going to pick up, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe even more seats than that. Well, now the results are in. Now we know. Turns out the Republicans got 9 seats. 9 total seats. They didn't even hit double digits. That is a historic wipeout. And the other side, the Democrats, even gained a seat in the Senate to add insult to injury. But the Republicans were also expecting to do well up and down the ticket. They were expecting to do great in governor's races. They were expecting to do great in state legislatures. They thought they would flip some state legislatures from Democrat to Republican. They didn't do that either. They didn't do that anywhere in the country. This turned out to be the first midterm since the 1930s that the opposition party didn't flip a single state house or state senate. And in fact, the Democrats were the party that flipped 4 state legislative chambers, both houses in Michigan, the House in Pennsylvania, and the Senate in Minnesota. It just went against the Republicans all over the country in all kinds of races. Look at Wisconsin and in Kansas. In both those states, Republicans had control of the state legislature. They were a total lock to stay in control of the state legislature. But on top of that, they were really confident that they were going to get rid of the Democratic governors in both of those states, in both Kansas and Wisconsin. Thereby, they would get full Republican control of both those states. Republicans fully expected that at the end of the day, by this point right now, they would have not only the governor's office, but the whole state legislature in both Wisconsin and Kansas. In Wisconsin and Kansas, as it turns out, the Republican candidates for governor both lost to Democrats. So the Republicans were not able to get full control of those states, even though they fully expected to. It was actually the Democrats in this election who got full control, who got the governorship and both houses of the state legislature in 4 states where they didn't have it before. 4 states you can remember with this easy mnemonic device. Because it's 4 states that start with M: Massachusetts, Maryland, Minnesota, Michigan. In all 4 of those states, the Democrats did not previously control the whole state legislature and the governor's office, but after this midterm election, now they do. And again, this is an election where, historically speaking, the president's party, the Democratic Party, should have been wiped out, should have been shellacked all over the country. Instead, they made up all that ground. The Washington Post actually crunched the numbers on what that means in terms of the U.S. population, in terms of which parties in control of which states. They found that the results of this election, which was historically horrible for Republicans and shockingly good for Democrats, they found that the overall top-line results, thanks to how well things went for Democrats in the states, is that for the first time in more than a decade, more Americans next year will live in states with full Democratic control than in states with full Republican control. 140 million Americans, as of next year, will live in blue states where the whole legislature and the governor's office are controlled by the Democrats. 140 million in blue states, as opposed to 131 million in red states. where the Republicans control both those things. More Americans will live in blue states than red states in terms of which party has total control. And that's profoundly important. That's not just important for mathematically keeping score between the parties and for pointing and gasping at how poorly this Republican Party did in historic terms this year. It's important in real life, right? It's important because so much policy that's relevant to people's lives is decided by who's in control at the state level. Everything from whether or not abortion is legal, thank you, Supreme Court, to whether you can get health insurance, whether you can get Medicaid, how well teachers are paid, road repairs, legal pot, voting rights, everything in between. Republicans did historically bad this year, and Democrats did historically well. And so more Americans will live in Democratic-controlled states next year than in Republican-controlled states. And that is hugely consequential. And we now know, as of today, that the surprising election results this year may have been shaped in part by a very large, previously secret pro-democracy investment in this year's election. A previously unknown investment of tens of millions of dollars was made without any publicity, without any public announcement during the midterm elections. We did not know about it until today, but this is tens of millions of dollars that was spent in 16 states, including all the states I just mentioned. And it was spent on local efforts to stop efforts to limit voting and to get people out to the polls. And I mean, tens of millions of dollars, all spent in the states, all on pro-democracy efforts, all of it unknown until today. Who did it? And why and how? And is that part of why the election results this year blew everybody's minds and changed history? The answer to that riddle, to that mystery and whodunit, is next. Stay with us.